Just as dawn was still clinging to the misty waters off New England, the roar of a Coast Guard chopper ripped through the quiet morning. Down at the pier, Eleanor Whitmore, white blazer, blonde hair pulled tight, screamed like the whole world had turned against her. "You have no right. This is my property. I have the legal papers." A federal officer stepped forward, his voice sharp like a hammer strike. "Eleanor Whitmore, you're under arrest for unlawful entry, forgery, and destruction of federal property." The cold snap of handcuffs drowned out the crash of waves under the dock. In that moment, Jonas Mercer, the new owner of Beacon Point, stood on the lighthouse steps, phone in hand, filming it all. I couldn't help but wonder how things had spiraled this far in less than a week. Just 6 hours earlier, that same woman had shown up on my dock with an entourage, waving forged documents supposedly dated back to 1887, demanding 50 grand in membership fees for something called the Coastal Heritage Homeowners Association. At her blatant threat, all I could do was give a bitter smile. What she and her people didn't know was that the man they were trying to corner wasn't just some retiree looking for peace and quiet. I'd spent 12 years in Coast Guard intelligence, staring down smuggling cartels that used islands like this as cover. And this time, I could see it plain as day. This so-called HOA wasn't a joke. Right then, I realized Beacon Point wasn't just a place for me to find peace. It was turning into ground zero for a dangerous scheme, where an organization hid behind the word community to mask their crimes. And I knew the fight between me and them was only just beginning. Right after the roar of the chopper faded into memory, I sat quietly inside the lighthouse and started thinking back on the road that had brought me to this island. My name's Jonas Mercer, 39 years old, and I spent 12 years in Coast Guard intelligence. Most of that time, I was out on the freezing waters off Massachusetts, tracking smugglers who treated the ocean like their own private highway. I've lived through February nights when the wind howled through the railings, seawater froze solid on my vest, and every blip on the radar could have meant millions of dollars worth of drugs. After testifying against a major cartel, I knew there was no way I could ever slip back into a normal life on the mainland. The Witness Protection Program handed me a list of properties seized from the very criminals I once hunted. And when the name Beacon Point Island showed up, something inside me stirred. The island is only 14 acres, but it's packed with surprises. First, there's the lighthouse built in 1870, standing over 100 feet tall, guiding captains through storms for generations. Below it, the old keeper's house had been renovated into a modern home with heating, insulation, and a communications system the cartel had paid to upgrade. I even found a small airstrip, just enough for my Cessna Caravan to take off. A deep water dock that could hold yachts over 60 feet. An underground fuel depot left from World War II that still worked. On top of that, there was a helipad, a grove of pine trees, and a web of trails winding through the woods. For the first 2 days, I walked the island, breathing in the mix of pine resin and salty air. The waves slammed against the cliffs, creating a deep kind of music I'd never heard on land. Some mornings, I stood on the lighthouse balcony, watching humpback whales move across the horizon, and I told myself, finally, peace has found me. But that peace only lasted for a moment. Because when you own land that others are hungry for, the storms are always waiting just beyond the horizon. Once I settled into the lighthouse, I started building a new routine. In the mornings, I'd wake up early, brew a strong pot of coffee, then carry a mug up to the top of the tower to watch the sun climb out of the Atlantic. The light spilled across the water, painting the sky pink, and for that moment, I felt like the last person left in the world. During the day, I kept busy checking the energy systems, the solar panels on the roof, the wind turbines spinning hard on the hillside, and the desalination unit in the basement turning seawater into drinking water. In the afternoons, I'd walk the pine-covered trails, notebook in hand, jotting down every corner of the island like I was getting to know a new friend. Through all those hours, my mind kept drifting to Maya, my 16-year-old daughter. She was living with her mom in Boston, but she'd called me the second she heard, "Dad, I'm coming to the island this summer, okay? My friends are going to be so jealous when they find out I've got a whole island to camp on." Her excitement made me laugh, even as I hid the worry sitting heavy inside me. Her promise filled me with both warmth and a pinch of fear. I wanted her summer to be full of memories, roasting marshmallows on the sand, staring up at stars untouched by city lights, and listening to the lighthouse foghorn echo through the night. But my old instincts whispered the truth: an island once tied to a cartel is never completely safe. Every evening, after turning off the lights and leaving only the soft glow of the beacon, I sat in the living room, staring at a photo of Maya grinning in her high school jacket. I whispered to myself, this is the new beginning. A quiet life, far from courtrooms, testimonies, and predators. Back then, I believed I had closed the book on my past and stepped into a new chapter. What I didn't know was that my faith in that peace was the very spark that would ignite the storm on its way. On the third morning after I set foot on the island, while I was tightening the last screws on the weather station at the top of the lighthouse, a strange sound cut through the air. It was the thrum of a prop plane, something not listed on any flight plan I'd filed. I grabbed my binoculars right away. A bright red de Havilland Beaver seaplane was landing on the calm water next to my dock. Its floats sliced through the waves, throwing up white spray, trailed by 3 boats, 2 Boston whalers, and a gleaming Sunseeker yacht over 60 feet long, so shiny it hurt to look at in the sun. My heart skipped half a beat. This wasn't some friendly neighbor visit. This was a deliberate show. The seaplane rolled up to the wooden dock, its doors swung open, and out stepped Eleanor Whitmore. Mid-50s, blonde hair pulled so tight her face looked carved in stone, heels clicking sharp on the planks. Cream blazer, crisp khaki pants, and pinned to her chest, a gold badge for something called the Coastal Heritage Homeowners Association. Right behind her came 5 more people in navy jackets with matching patches. A photographer with a lens as long as his arm snapped away, and at the rear was a man in a county police uniform, but his badge number didn't match any local format. As the whole crew marched up the trail, Eleanor pointed toward the lighthouse, her voice like steel. Document everything. That structure's in violation too. Then she turned to me with a smile so fake it almost glittered. You must be the new resident. I'm Eleanor Whitmore, president of the Coastal Heritage HOA. We need to talk right away. At her pushy tone, I set my wrench down in the grass, folded my arms, and said, go ahead. Care to explain? Eleanor immediately pulled a stack of yellowed papers from her leather briefcase, reading like a judge. Under the Maritime Charter of 1887, all islands within 5 miles fall under the jurisdiction of the coastal community. In 2005, that authority was transferred to the Coastal Heritage HOA. Therefore, you owe $50,000 in maintenance fees plus $5,000 a month. I felt my throat tighten, not from fear, but from holding back a bitter laugh. 12 years in intelligence had taught me to spot fake paperwork at a glance. Fonts too modern, seals printed not embossed, even references to a lighthouse built after 1920. In that split second, I knew exactly what I was looking at. This wasn't a normal HOA. This was a carefully staged play to legitimize something much bigger. And I knew the real power game had only just begun. After that first showdown, I figured Eleanor and her crew would need a few days to regroup. But I underestimated just how aggressive they were. The very next morning, right at 6, the landline in the lighthouse shrieked. A stiff male voice came through. This is the Environmental Committee of the Coastal Heritage HOA. We've received a report that you're storing fuel illegally. An inspector will arrive at 8. Have your paperwork ready. Before I could answer, the line went dead. At 7, another call, this time the Wildlife Review Board, warning me about violations affecting migratory seabirds. By 7:30, the phone rang again, accusing my dock of interfering with cod spawning. In less than 2 hours, 6 different committees from the HOA had dumped a pile of charges on me. Right away, I flipped on the recorder and saved every second. At exactly 8:15, a small boat pulled up to the dock. A man climbed out wearing an orange Home Depot vest with a plastic badge clipped to his chest that read Environmental Specialist. Clipboard in hand, he tried to sound official. I need to inspect the fuel depot and all structures. The HOA has the right to inspect at any time. I lifted my phone, camera rolling, and said calmly, I'm represented by counsel for all property matters. Show me a valid search warrant or leave now. On speaker, a soft laugh cut in. It was Patricia Hale, the maritime attorney I'd called the night before. Her voice was steady. Inspector, without a court order, Setting foot on this island is unlawful trespass. I strongly suggest you leave immediately." The man froze, face turning red, muttered a few words, then scrambled back to his boat. From the shore, I could see him already on his phone, probably reporting his failure. But of course, they didn't stop. That afternoon, 3 boats circled the island, blasting music so loud the waves slammed against my dock like they meant to break it. Every time I stepped outside, cameras on the boats swung straight at me, followed by jeers, "Get evidence on the violator." In that moment, my body shook, anger burning hot in my chest. But instead of exploding, I lifted my head and remembered an old lesson. The smart move is never to react the way your enemy wants. I let the hidden security cameras in my weather station do the work, recording every move, every boat number, every face. They thought they were scaring me. The truth was, they were hand-delivering evidence to the government on a silver platter. That night, I couldn't sleep. The waves kept pounding steady against the cliffs, but inside my head, the pieces just kept spinning. Why would Eleanor push this far? Why would a so-called HOA go as far as faking cops, hiring boats to harass me, and waving around papers forged a century ago? While checking the electrical system in the basement, I found a loose board behind the breaker panel. When I pulled it back, there was a hidden compartment, a few old bills, 3 fake passports, a loaded Glock 19, and a leather-bound journal. The moment I flipped open the first pages, my chest went tight. The notebook logged every boat that had come through Beacon Point for the last 2 years. One name kept showing up: Eleanor's Pride. 17 times. Almost all at night. Each stop lasted exactly 2 hours. I swallowed hard, trying to keep my pulse steady. I knew this pattern all too well. 12 years in intelligence had shown me the same setup: a drop point for smuggling. One lead boat scouts the dock, then the others roll in. Eleanor wasn't just some self-appointed HOA president. She was a link in a smuggling chain. I sat down on the cold cement floor, memories pulling me back to a 2014 operation. We intercepted what looked like a harmless fishing boat off Cape Cod. But inside the ice hold, instead of cod, were bricks of heroin wrapped in nylon. I can still see the eyes of that 19-year-old deckhand, desperate and used by the cartel. That feeling never left me. And now, the stink of another scheme was seeping up inside this very house. The next morning, I called Admiral Grant Novak on the sat phone, using our old code. The weather station picked up unusual signals. "The birds are landing at night." He paused, then said, "Keep recording. We're very interested in this flock's behavior." At the same time, I sent photos of the journal to Patricia, my lawyer. She gave a bitter laugh. "The Maritime Charter of 1887? Creative, but worthless. If they dare bring that to court, I'll turn it into a public joke." That evening, while fixing a simple dinner of smoked salmon, the phone rang. Maya's voice burst through, full of excitement. "Dad, my friends heard about the island, and now everybody wants to come. This summer's gonna be amazing." I smiled, but inside, it felt like a boulder pressing on my chest. I knew before she ever set foot here, I had to clear the storm already building. In the dim glow of the lighthouse beam, I closed the leather journal and drew in a long breath. I understood the game now. Eleanor wasn't here to collect HOA fees. She was here to guard a bloody secret Beacon Point was hiding. And I, by accident, had become the obstacle in her way. On the 5th morning at Beacon Point, dawn didn't come with gulls. It came with the roar of diesel engines from every horizon. I ran up to the lighthouse balcony. In the gray light, 15 speedboats were charging in, forming a line like a naval landing. Behind them, 2 giant barges carried bright yellow Caterpillar bulldozers, growling over the water. My throat went tight the instant I saw it. This wasn't harassment anymore. This was a full-on seizure. At 6 on the dot, they hit the dock. 30 people in black body armor jumped ashore, the words police and federal marshal printed on their backs. But the way they fumbled with their weapons told me they weren't real cops. They were hired actors, staged to create a show of force. Eleanor Whitmore stepped off the yacht, this time dressed head to toe in shiny black tactical gear, straps and buckles overdone like something from a military photo shoot. She had a megaphone and screamed, "Jonas Mercer, by order of the Coastal Heritage HOA, we are required to remove all unauthorized structures harmful to the environment. Cooperate or face the consequences." Before she finished, the first bulldozer roared forward, its blades screeching down. It barreled straight into the comms shed I had just installed. In seconds, with splintered metal shrieked. $200,000 worth of gear went up in dust. Another crew ran onto the airstrip with sledgehammers, smashing the runway lights. The second bulldozer went straight into the keeper's house kitchen. Glass shattered, wood split with loud snaps. My heart started racing. Then I heard Eleanor shout, "Burn it down." That plane was used for smuggling. Destroy it now to protect the evidence. She poured gasoline over my Cessna. The stench of fuel filled the landing area. My hands curled tight. I felt equal parts shaking and furious. Burning a plane isn't HOA enforcement. It's terrorism. I stepped out of the lighthouse, phone raised, filming every detail, my voice clear. Everyone here is committing federal crimes. You're impersonating police, destroying property, and about to start an arson. It's all being recorded. One of the black-clad men hesitated, his face going pale. Eleanor yanked his arm and screamed, "Don't listen to him. We have orders." She held up a stack of papers stamped like court documents, but from where I stood I could see they were blank pages with a pasted logo. In that split second I knew I had to pull my last card. I took out the satellite phone and hit the red emergency button. The light blinked and it sent a priority 1 distress. Federal property under attack. Immediate assistance required. Wind whipped across the lighthouse rail, carrying the smells of gasoline and sawdust. I looked up at the sky. My heart pounded hard, tight and hollow at once. I knew it was minutes now. Either I lose everything, or Eleanor loses her mask for good. Just minutes after I hit the emergency button, that familiar thunder rolled in from the horizon. At first it was just a faint thump, then it swelled into a storm shaking the sky. From the east, 3 Coast Guard MH-60 Jayhawks tore through the thin clouds at blistering speed. The second the rotors roared overhead, the men in black scattered on the dock. Some tried raising their guns, but their trembling hands and wide eyes gave them away. These weren't cops. They were hired actors, never trained for the moment federal forces dropped out of the sky. The first chopper dipped low, rotor wash ripping the fake papers from Eleanor's hands, scattering them like dead leaves. A voice blasted from the loudspeaker, sharp as thunder. "This is the United States Coast Guard. Drop your weapons and get on your knees now. Anyone resisting will be treated as an armed threat." Ropes uncoiled and dropped. MSRT Operators Maritime Security Response Team slid down in teams of 4, black shapes hitting the ground fast. They fanned out instantly, M4S raised, scanning every target with cold precision. I kept my phone recording and shouted loud enough for everyone to hear. "These are the imposters. She, Eleanor Whitmore, is the one in charge." Eleanor spun around, her face blazing red with rage. In her hand was a flare gun, aimed at the pile of files soaked in gasoline. She screamed, "No one takes this from me. This is my land. I'll burn it all." For a heartbeat, time froze. Her hand shook, finger tightening on the trigger. But before she could fire, a sharp crack split the air. A rubber round from a helicopter sniper struck the flare gun, knocking it clean out of her grip. She crumpled to her knees, clutching her scorched hand, screaming in fury. 3 MSRT agents rushed in, zip-tying her wrists. One called out, "Target secured." The fake cops were broken. Weapons clattered onto the dock. Some dropped to their knees, sobbing, "We're just actors. They hired us. We didn't know this was federal property." The truth was plain. They were cheap pawns in a much bigger game. But Eleanor, she was different. She lifted her face, eyes burning with hatred, locked on me, and shrieked, "You set me up. You're no ordinary resident. Who the hell are you?" And then Admiral Grant Novak stepped off a 4th helicopter that had just landed. His white uniform stood out against the smoke and wreckage. He strode forward, shook my hand, and spoke loud enough for everyone to hear. "Well done, Agent Mercer. The bait worked. We've been waiting 3 years for this moment." The air on the dock turned heavy. The captured finally realized the truth. They hadn't just trespassed on an island. They'd attacked federal property. And worse, they'd gone up against an undercover agent. As Eleanor was dragged onto a Coast Guard boat, she still screamed, "This is just an HOA dispute. You'll regret this." But her voice was drowned out by the pounding rotors. And in that moment, standing on the lighthouse steps, My heart raced, but my mind was strangely calm. I knew the game was over. Justice had landed. Within hours of the raid, Beacon Point turned into a full-blown investigation base. FBI trucks came in by barge. Tents went up along the dock. Techs in jackets marked evidence combed through every corner, picking up gasoline-soaked scraps of paper, snapping photos of bulldozer tracks pressed deep into the dirt. Eleanor Whitmore was hauled back to the mainland, her face still twisted with rage. But just days later, she faced a wall of charges from forgery and money laundering to domestic terrorism for destroying federal property. In the end, the court handed down 45 years, no chance of parole. At 55, it was basically a life sentence. Her husband, Aldrich Whitmore, didn't get far either. He was arrested at Logan Airport trying to fly to the Caymans with 2 suitcases of cash. Inside was also an encrypted hard drive holding a list of coastal properties stolen through the fake HOA scheme. Prosecutors uncovered a sprawling network, 17 homes and parcels, worth more than $40 million. The biggest shock came from the old fuel bunker on the island. Waterproof containers stuffed with $12 million in cash and 60 kilos of pure heroin. Beacon Point hadn't just been a transfer point, it was a stash house. Eleanor had been desperate to take it back at any cost, just to wipe away the trail of her crimes. Within 6 months, Navy Seabees rebuilt everything. The dock was reinforced with steel, the airstrip paved with military-grade concrete. The keeper's house rose again with a bulletproof steel frame. The lighthouse was fitted with shatterproof glass and a modern lighting system, but its soul from 1870 was left intact. As for me, the government replaced the destroyed Cessna with a brand new one, loaded with upgraded NAV gear. But what mattered more was knowing Maya would have a safe place to spend her summers. When she stepped off the boat, her eyes lit up. "Dad, I can't believe this used to be a battlefield. It looks like a movie base now." I laughed, but inside, I swelled with pride. She saw the truth. Justice doesn't always come in a courtroom. Sometimes it comes roaring in with helicopter rotors and the snap of handcuffs. The Beacon Point story spread fast across New England. Local TV called it the biggest fake HOA in coastal history. States rushed to pass new laws forcing HOAs to open their books and face yearly audits. Folks nicknamed it the Beacon Act, after the island that had become a symbol of protecting homeowners' rights. For me, the real reward wasn't the fortified home or the payout for damages. It was a moment in a Boston grocery store, overhearing 2 women talking. They sent me a fine, threatened to take my house. The other shot back, "Sounds like another Eleanor. Call the FBI, they'll shut it down quick." I smiled to myself. I knew then, Beacon Point wasn't just my refuge anymore. It had become a symbol, a reminder that no one has the right to steal your home with fake papers and empty threats. One summer afternoon, I sat on the new dock, a steaming cup of coffee in my hand, watching the sunset spread across the sea. The sun dipped red into the horizon, its glow reflecting off the freshly restored lighthouse. The only sound left was the steady call of the foghorn, guiding ships far offshore. In that moment, I realized Beacon Point wasn't just a refuge. It had become a symbol. The lighthouse didn't just guide captains through the fog, it reminded us that the light of justice can always cut through the shadows of greed. Maya sat beside me, kicking her feet over the salty water, her voice bubbling with excitement. "Dad, I've made up my mind. I'm applying to the Coast Guard Academy. I want to protect the ocean like you did." Hearing those words, my chest tightened, a mix of worry and pride. I knew her choice didn't come from textbooks, it came from what she'd seen herself. That justice needs people brave enough to stand tall. I thought back to Eleanor Whitmore. She believed power and threats could make people bow. But it was her arrogance that exposed her true face and brought her fake empire crashing down in a single morning. In that instant, I knew I'd never look at HOAs the same way again. An organization built to protect a community can twist into a criminal tool if no one holds it accountable. And the lesson of Beacon Point proved one thing. All it takes is one person willing to say no, and the gears of oppression start to crack. A question rose inside me. How many families out there are still suffering in silence, afraid of HOA retaliation? Do they know they have the right to fight back, to call a lawyer, to be protected? The air around me felt heavy. I could hear my heartbeat blend with the rhythm of the waves. And I understood the most important thing I could do wasn't just protecting this island. It was sharing the story, so anyone feeling cornered would know they're not alone. I looked up as the lighthouse beams swept across the night sky. It felt like a silent promise. Anyone hiding crimes behind a mask of power will be exposed. Eleanor is now just a name echoing through federal prison, tied to failure and disgrace. But Beacon Point still stands not as a smuggler's hub, but as a beacon of justice. And I knew this story wasn't just mine. It was a reminder to anyone threatened by false power. Sometimes, one light is all it takes to drive the darkness back.